We're streaming and we're recording. Oh God, what a hairstyle. Blech. I am fulfilling the request of insert YouTube comment name here. So I'm going to explain this from the perspective of somebody who just doesn't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm playing this DK for the very first time, and trust me, I was there. I didn't know what to do. I'm going to tell you a couple things. I'm going to give you some tips and so on, and hopefully bring you to speed, because I was pretty lost. I didn't really know what to do on DK. It was my first time. So here's what you do as a Frost dual wield tank. Hit your buttons, man. DK is all about hitting buttons because you have essentially unlimited resources. When you're using your runes, really all you have to be mindful of is the power, because the power is what you need for Frost Strike. And Frost Strike is the other damage doer for single target aside from Obliterate. Now when I run in, the first thing I do, which is kind of dangerous, but luckily we have a bunch of DKs, so I'm not really worried about them dying or anything. But the first thing I do is I run in and I Icy Touch. This gives me Snap Threat on the target. So it has a modifier, and so that's why it's good to start with it. Make sure that whatever target you're going for, make sure it's the most dangerous one in the group. And secondly, I hit Plague Strike. And this doesn't matter if you're DPS or not, right? You need to open up with your dots because most of the DK's damage comes from your abilities that are amplified if they're afflicted with these things. So, a bunch of words, but cooldowns. And on a single target, and this is another reason why it feels so good to play Frost dual wield tank. It feels like Fury Prot, except instead of spamming Heroic Strike, you're basically just going back and forth between Obliterate and Frost Strike. And that's cool. I don't even bother with diseases because things don't live that long. And luckily, I don't need to use Blood Strike anymore because I'm not using the relic for that. There's a relic that gives you a crit chance. It's good, but getting the flat damage Sigil of Awareness is way better. It amplifies your Obliterate damage. So in a non-ADHD way, let's continue. So I open up with the Icy Touch, and this puts a dot on them, yes, but it's a threat modifier, and it adds damage to your other abilities that depend on it. Plague Strike, same kind of deal. You put a disease on the target, and if you have more diseases on the target, your other abilities do more damage. Okay, that's it. So again, I run in, I Icy Touch, okay, and then I Plague Strike, and then I spread with Pestilence. Now notice that my comrades are getting hit. That's not perfect. Hello. So if you're noticing as you're tanking, maybe it's the first time for you and that's why you're here. If you're noticing that you're having issues with threat, I still open up this way. Now, safer would be to start with Howling Blast, because Howling Blast is the bread and butter for a Frost DK. And not only is it a great feeling when you see a bunch of shit just blow up, because you get huge crits with Howling Blast. It's a safe bet when you're running in, because you're going to get AoE Snap Threat. Now, the other thing that you could open up with is Death and Decay. The reason why these are they're safe, but they're not ideal, is because they use your blood, your unholy, or your frost stuff. So notice how they ran in because they're just like, who cares, right? It's so easy, this content. In the future, that's going to get them killed. But I can easily get threat back by prioritizing Howling Blast. And I try to keep it on cooldown whenever I'm doing it's a BOE, whenever I'm doing heroics. Even AoE, if I can get ahead of my group, if I can get ahead of the DPS going AWOL. Icy Touch first, Plague Strike second. Notice they each take one of their corresponding rune types. So Icy takes one Frost rune, Plague Strike takes one Unholy rune. So if you're looking at Howling Blast, it takes one of those, one of the Frost and one of the Holy. So because you start with two, you could reasonably do what I'm about to do, which is start with the Howling Blast, get Snap Threat, and then apply. But I guarantee you're going to run into issues with your rune generation. It's just going to happen. It's inevitable. And when I'm fighting for threat AoE-wise, honestly, what I'm looking at is tab target with Frost Strike, because it's a runic power spender, and I usually have it. Now, Frost Strike does not have a threat modifier, but it does such good damage that you're pretty much always going to get the target back. Try not to get frustrated. This is for the beginners. Okay, if you already know what you're doing, you're probably not here. So run in, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, and then Pestilence. Notice that Pestilence eats 1 blood rune. So if you're short a blood rune, you're not going to be able to use this, right? And if you're in a fight, it's a really good point right now. If you're in a long fight, you're going to increase your DPS by making sure that you save a blood to use Pestilence right before your diseases fall off the target. So typically I do what I just did. I open up with my 2 dots, I use Pestilence to spread it, and then if things are falling off, I'll turn and I'll Death Grip them. I have Death Grip bound to Horn of Winter, by the way. It's really nifty. You never let that fall off that way. But yeah, you DG, that taunts the target, gets it back to you. If it's on cooldown, you use Dark Command. Here comes repetition, right? Open up with Icy Touch, follow with Plague Strike, then use Pestilence to spread it to all the nearby targets. Okay, use your abilities. Here we go. Open, 2, don't need to spread it. I'm going to use Death and Decay, so I get ticking damage. Now I'm going to use my other rune generating cooldowns to quickly get my runes up. Okay, got to get up to get down. And from that point on, really all you're doing, I was talking, so I kind of missed my chance to update my dots. But you just bounce between Frost Strike and Obliterate. General tank awareness, right? If things aren't hitting you, you're doing it wrong. You need to be uglier or something. And you have to take the initiative. You have to try to be in front. Healers will complain. It doesn't matter. They're a bad healer, right? If someone is complaining, oh, you're running too far away, forget them, okay? They're slow. They're probably keyboard turners. Sorry, you just don't belong, okay? You really don't. I will preemptively use my D&D, mainly because right when they become active, I want the tick to land on them. And the DPS on this group is just stupid, so I don't have to worry about anything. But open up Icy Touch, follow up Plague Strike, spread with Pestilence, okay? Then let's talk about what happens after. So I'll do it for this pull, and I'll talk about kind of my thought process after that. Because it is important. You want to get into a rhythm that not only does great damage, because that's why we're here, man. We want to do Frost Dual Wield because it's fun, and you do a lot of damage. But we also want to maintain our threat on targets. So they're coming out early. I'm going to drop my D&D early. We want to kill this one. It's a caster. So here we go. Icy Touch. I'm going to interrupt it. Pestilence after. Good. Now what do I do? Frost Strike, right? Because I couldn't use Obliterate in that moment, so I just used Frost Strike. Right now, Obliterate's on cooldown, so I'm using Frost Strike. If I notice that my targets on Plater are yellow, if I'm losing threat, I will immediately go to them, tab, click, whatever, and I will use Frost Strike. Now, if you are in a situation where you're tanking and you don't have runes, this happens quite a bit for DK. You don't have runes to spend, you're kind of locked out. You're basically white hitting and look like a dummy. That's a good time to use Blood Tap because it converts your runes, or Empower, which activates all of them, but it costs runic power. Okay, I'm gonna get snapped right here because these have a tendency to go straight for the healer. They don't live long enough to really care about spreading disease anyway, so honestly, I'm just focused on that bread and butter, baby. Frost Strike, Obliterate. The more obliterates you get in, the more damage you're gonna do overall. I will say, when I'm doing Trash and Nax, it's mostly a mess of Howling Blast and Blood Boil. If you need to, you can use Blood Boil, and sometimes that is just enough to snap things back to you. I often find myself doing it just because there's the lingering caster mob who starts to threat too much toward another person, and I very rarely use Death Strike. Here comes that single target story. Icy Touch, Plague Strike, and then immediately Obliterate. It's on cooldown, so I'm going to start Frost Striking. Notice it's coming down 3 seconds. 2, and notice my dots are falling off, so I Pestilence and I reset my dot timers and go right back to Obliterate. And that's it. You'll find that rhythm in there. You notice your Obliterate's starting to come off, use it, right? Notice your dot's about to fall off, reset them with Pestilence. That's Frost DK. Fun thing is that you're the tank, so you get to get hit by things, and you won't do as much damage, but you're definitely more engaged. Again, I will use Blood Boil here because more often than not, as you're tanking in Frost, you have a lot of... You have excess blood to spend. Sounds weird. But yeah, you have excess blood runes to give, so don't be afraid to Blood Boil to get AoE snap threat. That's it in a nutshell. Just always opening with Icy Touch whenever you can, because it just generates enough threat to snap them to you. Spread Pestilence, and I guarantee you're going to get threat back if you use Howling Blast. Even if they turn from you for a second, use Howling Blast. And if the Blood Boil doesn't work, if the Howling Blast doesn't work, go to Frost Strike, because it, guess what, only uses Runic Power. And chances are, if you're using the other stuff to try to get the threat, you're generating the Runic Power you need for Frost Strike. So that's what this looks like. That's the fun of it. I love it. It's an absolute blast, man. Walking in, just punishing things. Ooh, you hear that train go by? Damn. Definitely get that snap threat. Try to get things back into D&D. That's going to make a lot of your DK friends happy, because they can't move it once they put it down. Once they put that carpet down, they can't move it. So after playing BC as a Prot Warrior, you know, the struggle that is. There was something special about Prot Warrior. Not gonna lie, I think the 4-piece Destroyer tier 5 set was good. When you got that haste proc, you felt really good. Clunky, maybe a little bit too much waiting. Revenge didn't feel good to use, really. Super Shield Slam reliant. But I'm not even worried about diseases. It's not gonna live very long. It's wiggly. And if you study logs of other people, if you look at the Frost DK logs, you're gonna see that the more obliterates they use, the more damage they do. Then of course your weapons. I'm still waiting for Broken Promise, I think it's called. But this guy's lucky, he's already got an Angry Dread. Angry Dread is exceptionally good for Frost DK. That's another thing. Frost DK relies on slow weapons, because slow weapons have higher attack damage. If you're tanking, it's good to have fast weapons, because faster white hits gets their attention. It's just the way it goes. You could use both Reaper of Dark Souls. They're awesome weapons. I mean, they were fucking made for DK. Big damage, 281 opening damage. It's way more than either of these. And if you use Icebound Fortitude, it'll prevent you from getting stunned. This is great, because a lot of mechanics stun tanks. Just thanks, Blizzard. One nutshell in a heroic. Once you're headlong into the fight, you're going to find that you have excess blood runes most of the time, and there are ways to spend it. One way is with an interrupt, so Strangulate uses one. Another way is Blood Strike, which is basically filler if you can't use Frost or Obliterate. But I will tell you right now, Blood Strike just doesn't do very good damage. And if you study the logs of DKs in raids, they're not really using Blood Strike. It's almost like the hamstring, in a sense. Like, you'll use it just to see if you can trigger a proc, but otherwise, it's just, you know. I think I was studying the Patchwork. I was studying a Patchwork log of a DK, like top DK in the world, and I think he had 7 Blood Strikes on that fight. But he had a ridiculous number of Obliterates and Frost Strikes. So keep those things in mind. Nervous about tanking, don't be. Just hit your buttons, you know. You have your priorities, you know what you need to do, and be patient. If things run around a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. Just Death Grip them back. If things are all kind of going away from you, they're not really hitting you, make sure you're in Frost Presence. That's something that can happen if your bindings are all screwed up. Sometimes you'll change presence. And if they're running away from you, use Howling Blast. If you can't use Howling Blast, use Blood Boil. If you can't use Blood Boil, use Frost Strike. And just tab target. Okay. A lot of tricks up the DK sleeve, but hopefully this helps. This was requested, so just wanted to kind of provide the real experience of what it's like to run in there with high DPS and try to keep it under control. This phase of the game is just so easy. All you need to do is hit your buttons and be in Frost Presence. Go Engineering, that's going to make tanking a big deal. I didn't use it nearly enough, but you can put the frag belt on your belt in Wrath, and that's a free bomb every 6 minutes? Yeah, every 6 minutes you get 1,000 damage bomb, which actually stuns them. So it's kind of nifty if you have a huge group of mobs. It's a very tiny radius, but it comes in clutch when you have a bunch of casters, especially when you're clearing BF. And what else is there to say? Not much. You've got your interrupts. If you need to use anti-magic shell, that's pretty good in situations where you know that you're taking a bunch of spell damage. And that's it. That's really it. Frost DK dual wield is where it's at during Wrath, in my opinion. I don't see myself changing anytime soon. I find Blood to be clunky, slow. It's the go-to tank spec, but I've never really been one to just go to Wowhead and be like, what's the thing I do? Nah, man. Nah, do it differently. I wouldn't criticize the charts too heavily from one heroic, especially with pumpers. When you actually get into a raid, you'll see just how fun this can be, especially on trash. Frost DK is just so much fun on trash, and you can play with your... I'm not going to do Oculus, you can. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Bunch of words. Go out there, have fun. I definitely recommend setting up your UI in a way that shows what your main abilities are. That's it. Have fun. That's what it's all about. Frost DK dual wheel, baby. Live that life. Go get 'em.